Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What role does international trade play in helping to improve the quality of life and raise the standard of living for people in the United States and around the world? What is one organization in the state of Kentucky doing to focus on international trade and to reach out to other parts of the world? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other important issues. Welcome back to our program. You're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved in any type of media outlet, be it a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps it's a university with an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a website and you have an interest in our shows and would like to share them with your family, friends, and colleagues in the community, please go to our website. You're invited to download the programs free of charge at no cost. Global Connections Television is provided as a public service to highlight how international issues do impact our lives both internationally and locally. Today we're going to take a look at international trade and the importance of international trade and what one group is doing to really enhance the opportunities for people, businesses primarily in the state of Kentucky. My guest today is an expert on both of these topics. My guest today is Mr. Ed Webb. Mr. Ed Webb is the president and CEO of the World Trade Center, Kentucky. Mr. Webb manages the operations and strategic direction for this Global Trade Association. Ed Webb, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Bill, good to be back.
Well, I appreciate you being with me. It's been 3 years, and I know a lot has happened.
3 years?
3 years, hard to believe. Right. Anyway, well, let's get into it, Ed. Right off the bat, what is the World Trade Center Kentucky? First off, well, let's do that. Just what is that in relation to the World Trade Center organization?
We are a licensed holder of the World Trade Center Association of New York City and have been a part of that organization from day one. And Kentucky founded its location roughly about 30 years ago. And the center was founded in New York and in Kentucky, and there are roughly 300 such locations globally in 88 different countries. But our role is simple. We help companies grow through trade, and that trade through driving innovation, by driving the export of their product or services overseas, which in turn drives jobs, drives revenue. And again, I mentioned innovation because you have to change your product many times to be in that global economy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And if our viewers would like more information, they can go to www.wtcky.org.
That's our website.
That's your website.
And the parent company is WTCA.org, World Trade Center Association.
Just changed it.
There's two digits there, and you're all set.
Well, that's great. Well, let's talk a little bit about in general terms, about what you do. You have three main goals, as I understand it. One, you have an advisory capacity to businesses. You provide educational activities and also trade missions. Just briefly, how do you do, well, let's just take each of the three. How do you advise businesses?
We work with companies in Kentucky. Right now we have 3,000 to 4,000 businesses that are trading actively, both import and export. And inevitably, the small to mid-sized companies cannot afford to have a full-time trade officer on staff. They're highly trained, they're customs licensed brokers in many cases. So we'll step in and be that sixth person on the basketball team, if you will, to step in for the company, look at the issue, provide support on the particular need or problem. Much like going in saying, I can't get it out of port, what am I doing wrong here? We'll step in, act on behalf of the company, and move that product in or out.
Which is very important.
Yes.
Very, very important, especially if you've not had a lot of experience in this particular area. You're really stymied when it comes to dealing with folks in other parts of the world and the bureaucracy and what have you, and the rules and regulations.
Exactly how that game is
We've
played
been there, done
sometimes.
that, as they say. Well, what do you do in the educational area? We're talking about advising. What do you do as far as providing educational information to businesses and people who want to get into the exporting business?
Bill, that's our primary platform. We're a university, and for all intents and purposes, the other two pieces you mentioned, the business missions and advisory, are ancillary to what we provide as an organization. We create trade awareness through education. We develop workforce, if you will, to help those companies understand how to export. Do I need an export license? Where do I go for support? Who do I work with in the state? Who do I work with at the Small Business Association to facilitate trade activity in those companies? We found that if we create trade advocates, these are students who go through our trade certification programs, who go through our University of Kentucky Gatton College program, which we're very excited about that program. It's huge. We're one of the few trade centers globally that has a flagship university behind it, as UK does for the World Trade Center. But if we create those advocates, they go to those companies and say, why aren't we trading internationally? Why aren't we growing internationally? Why aren't we doing this? Self-fulfilling over time. So education is key for the trade center. It's our primary driver in the state. Again, workforce development for us is getting those companies up to speed internationally.
Exactly. And you mentioned this Gatton School of Business at the UK, the University of Kentucky, not the United Kingdom.
You know what, I have to watch that. That's a Kentucky boy habit.
We go worldwide
the
here.
University
so we
of
have
Kentucky.
To lay this
but I love the UK.
Exactly.
So.
We all love UK, both UKs, right? And of course, we're talking about the University of Kentucky, which is a flagship university located in Lexington, Kentucky, in the United States. But this is an example of what can be done in other areas of the world. You mentioned before that the World Trade Centers are operating in 88 countries, and there are 300 of them.
That's correct.
In 88 countries. So there's a tremendous network out there for people. Many of our viewers probably are involved with World Trade Centers, or perhaps would like to be, and they can certainly tap into these to learn more about what's going on. Well, now we're talking about Kentucky. Let's take it down to the micro level. Kentucky, I think when people from around the United States, maybe from overseas, think about Kentucky, they might think of Kentucky Fried Chicken, perhaps Muhammad Ali, the Kentucky Derby, maybe Kentucky Bourbon, Kentucky Thoroughbreds, racehorses, that type of thing. How do you, as an expert in this area of trade promotion, view Kentucky?
First of all those things you mentioned are fantastic. I love everything you just mentioned, and as a Kentuckian, I take great pride in that. But Kentucky is much, much, much more than that. And as we evolve the last couple of years, we've looked and dug some deeper diving into what our industries really are. And I view Kentucky as a state of innovation and a state of incredible logistics of getting product in, getting product out because of our demographics. And when I say logistics, you're looking at the big play here with UPS, FedEx, DHL, all with major hubs in Kentucky, making a lot of things happen as far as getting product into the state and again, getting product out. So when I think of Kentucky, Bill, I'm looking at a lot more than just the bourbon, which we love, and the horses, which we love, and the KFC, which we all love, and Muhammad Ali. To me, it's a state that's evolving right now because we're finally looking at what can we be and what are we really. And we get into more statistics later in our discussion, you'll see why I feel that way.
Exactly. You mentioned UPS, United Parcel Service. They have, I think, maybe the largest hub throughout the whole UPS system around the world, and they are an international freight deliverer. And of course, that's located in Louisville, Kentucky, which is tremendous revenue generating activity. Not to mention it's a source of pride, too, for the people in that area.
It really is. Worldport is huge for the state, and UPS put a lot of money in that project. However, if you're the announcement, DHL just announced an expansion for the umpteenth time of their facility in northern Kentucky. And then with Amazon making their recent announcement they want to locate a facility at that same hub, that really blows the walls out to even more growth. And FedEx, give them credit, also announced about a year ago expanding a new facility in Louisville. So all three are playing, ball with Kentucky to create jobs and create a expansion and to to grow their facilities.
As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at the micro. We're looking at a particular state, the state of Kentucky, focusing on a few of the cities. But we could be talking about folks in Colombia. We could be talking about people in Japan. We could be talking about people in England, wherever it may be. They could be doing the same. They are doing the same things to a large degree,
They are.
and utilizing some of the same resources. Your organization and others to help promote international trade and exports. Why is that? I mentioned in the beginning that it helps to raise the standard of living and the quality of life. Are those the only two reasons to promote international trade? Why? If I knew nothing about international trade, which is pretty close, what would you say to say this is why it's important?
That's a great question too, Bill. The founder of the Trade Center years back when he founded this organization had our first theme, our first commentary about the Trade Center was trade, peace through trade. Let me try it again, peace through trade. And he really believed that if more countries work together on trading product and services, that inevitably you have to have a relationship. There's got to be something about a like or a connection saying, if I work with France or I work with Japan, we're trading goods and services we both want. And we're both helping each other in our commerce and standard of living. So that in itself, to some degree, will promote a peaceful relationship. Does it always? No. And that's very visionary to think that, but inevitably it does play out. If you look at most of our major trading partners that we have in Kentucky alone, obviously Canada, thank God, because it's so close to us, so we get an invasion by Canada. But you go to Canada, you go to Mexico, and you go to the UK, we just mentioned United Kingdom, you go to China. All people we're working with day in and day out, promoting a trade relationship and trying to grow that relationship. And that evolves hopefully into bigger and better things for all the countries involved.
That's very, very true. As you mentioned, peace through trade is a good maxim. There's no doubt about it, because countries that are trading with each other and are benefiting from resources in each country generally don't want to go to war with each other and disrupt it. It's not the best thing to do, not a wise thing to do. Well, we're talking about Kentucky. What are the chief exports in Kentucky today? They are not the same today as they were 20 years ago, I'm sure. But what are some of the main exports that are going into the international marketplace?
The ones that come to mind, obviously, and it's interesting you say that or ask that question too, because we had this earlier discussion. Automotive always comes to mind, and automotive is huge for the state. It's second, and I'll tell you in a minute who's first, but second is automotive and automotive parts. With the large GM plant we have in Bowling Green making the Corvettes, the Ford Motor Company in Louisville, and Toyota in Georgetown, which just announced a huge expansion, a $1.3 billion expansion for its Camry division, and Lexus, I believe, also. Automotive is huge for us. We're moving a lot of automotive parts between Mexico, Canada, elsewhere. Chemicals, a big chemical play in Kentucky because we have natural resources here that businesses need. So chemicals ranks right up there. Our number one is aerospace.
Aerospace.
And
Aerospace in Kentucky.
It blows people out of the water every time we mention that, but it is aerospace. And aerospace encompasses both aerospace and the aircraft development and instrumentation that goes into those products. So aerospace is first.
And this is primarily through General Electric producing engines for airplanes, aircraft, or is it much more involved?
No, it's huge. That is huge, no doubt about it, because a part for an aircraft is very expensive, that engine they developed and make. But what it also plays into, every time you land in Kentucky or land in New York City or land in Europe, that landing gear that's bringing that craft down on that airfield is made in Kentucky. There's a French company here located in Walton called Safran, S-A-F-R-A-N, and they make the landing systems for most major aircraft made in Walton, Kentucky. And they've just gone through their third expansion in Walton, about to go into their fourth expansion. So it's not just the engines, it's a little bit of everything. Instrumentation, armrest, you name it, we make it.
Exactly. Now, there's nothing more international than going into outer space. This program,
There you go.
My program focuses on international, but we don't get into outer space too often. But you do have a university, Morehead State University in Eastern Kentucky, that's involved with the NASA, National Associate Aeronautics and Space Administration. I'll get it right in a minute. The NASA of the United States government. What type of program are they involved in?
Professor Ben Malthus has been an incredible asset to the state. What he has done through his astrophysics class is create a whole new generation of learners and thinkers in this part of the state, throughout the state. And some of the things they've done there have led to incredible developments. For example, I mentioned to you earlier, we had a couple of companies in Lexington, Space Tango, one other being Exim. They provide what is referred to as a cube satellite. In its briefest or simplest terms, the size of a bread box. And they're developed there at Morehead State and some of the technology. And those are sent to the space station and basically perform tests for different companies through zero or zero gravity in this case. And because of that zero gravity effect, a lot of companies, particularly pharmaceuticals, want to see how they can make their product better, how they'll impact their product. So Morehead State's been driving a lot of that from day one and coming up with the creativity, some of the programming itself, to bring the students to that part of the state to say, why not NASA? Why not space exploration?
Exactly. And again, as we mentioned earlier, this is a microcosm of what is going on in other states in the United States. It could be California, New Jersey, Alabama, and what's going on in other countries too. And many of the same things, and some other things going on there that we may not be aware of. Well, before we run out of time, Ed, let's talk a little bit about three important organizations or agreements, I should say, that we've heard a lot about lately. One is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. I think that came online in 1994. It was an agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico.
Correct.
To set up basically a trade-free zone. What is the status of that, and why is that important?
That's one of the key agreements for the U.S. You look at the impact of both Canadian jobs and exports, Mexican jobs in Mexico and exports and importing. Mexico accounts for roughly 6 million jobs in the U.S., 6 million, where Canada's right at 5 million. 10 million bodies working day in and day out. Because they're on our borders, they're easy to move product to and from on a regular basis. And we got to protect both of those relationships. There's a lot of discussion on what is happening right now in Washington with both of those. And we've got a new president, I think, who's viewing those agreements and is basically saying, when do we go back last and look at what we're getting from our share and what they're getting from their share? And it's not just a one-way street. It works both ways. So that's one of our primary trade tools is NAFTA.
And I just heard an economist mention, in fact, this morning, who said that there's such a supply chain, and you alluded to that, where parts for trucks or whatever that come from Canada, some come from Mexico, whatever the situation might be. But he commented that he said if NAFTA were eliminated, the price of a pickup would go up $3,000 if that supply chain were disrupted and you had to do it internally, had to do everything within the country. Well, another
That is correct.
agreement was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP.
Yes.
That came up during the Obama administration. It was having a rough road. No, it was not a very popular agreement, but it was still very important from the standpoint that there were 12 Pacific countries that were Pacific Ocean countries that were going to be part of this agreement, and were one goal, and maybe not the most important goal, but one was to set up one of the largest trading. Well, it is an important goal to set up one of the largest trading associations in the world with those 12 countries. But now the United States is not even remotely involved in it. It is pulled out. But the other 11 countries are moving forward with it. They just met recently in Santiago, Chile. And now China has moved in to replace the United States as one of the key countries. And one of the main goals before was to keep China somewhat isolated, not isolated, but out of the negotiation area and out of this trade arena, and have these other 12 countries. So what can be done in this, and why is it important for us to relook at that perhaps?
Let me back up real quick on NAFTA.
Sure.
Let me just say this really quickly. NAFTA's going to be fine. We're going to be tweaking both countries as far as tariffs. There'll be some pain, and it'll work both ways. So NAFTA will be tweaked, but it will not go away, ever. TPP is a challenge because obviously both parties have had been hesitant during the campaign trail to endorse it, and it's basically fallen by the wayside for now. What will happen there Bill, and you're right on talking about China coming in with the regional approach and trying to replicate it, bring it to, for their benefit. It's not gone. TPP's not gone. Right now it's kind of the side. And what I envision happening is it coming back to the table, maybe branded differently, and maybe with a few things changing. You mentioned the 12 countries. There are 18,000 tariffs about to be eliminated with that. 18,000. And that would promote even more trade. The catch is making sure all that was transparent. And I think that bothered both sides of the aisle to say, do we really understand what we're agreeing to here once we sign this? So my feeling is that it is very important for the U.S. to be involved and to get it back on the table. I don't have great confidence that what China's proposing is going to be adopted that easily and that quickly. However, they are making a movement toward that, and they want to.
Well, they're definitely involved, no doubt about it.
Very much.
One of the main concerns about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement was that businesses could sue, they could undermine governments as far as if they did not like their environmental rules or regulations, and they could actually undermine the sovereignty of various governments and preempt those rules and regulations. That was a major problem, and of course that needs to be looked at in the future.
There was some detail there that you just mentioned that had some folks thinking, let's look at this carefully.
Exactly. Well, another organization we hear a bit about is the Export-Import Bank, the Exim Bank. What is the Export-Import Bank?
Exim, let me first say, that is one of the most wonderful organizations the government has ever come up with. And we work with a local guy named Mark Klein in Kentucky, and they help businesses basically secure credit that the banks don't want on their own. And how to best explain that with the Exim Bank is that if you go to, you need a financing deal or a credit insurance, many times a bank won't want that package. And what Exim will do is backfill what they don't want. So the banks are still involved, very much involved in a transaction. But Exim steps in and says, okay, the part you don't want, Mr. Bank or Mrs. Bank, we'll take this and make the deal go through. So they're very important to us. Plus, Bill, the key thing about Exim Bank, which I think shocks a lot of people, they're one of two, and I can't tell you the other one, by the way, but they're one of two government organizations that each year banks a profit. And my comment to me, or to DC, and I've been there to discuss this with the people in power, and keep saying, why would you want to challenge a profitable government agency? I don't understand this.
There's something missing in this picture.
I'm missing it because I'm looking for making profit day in and day out with the Trade Center. And I'm like, I'll take that millions they put in the bank every year as a profit for the organization. That one stumps me, but we need Exim Bank in a big way. So that will hopefully never go away.
It has been very important, especially to corporations like Boeing. Boeing Aircraft has really utilized it, and Boeing, of course, is selling aircraft all around the world.
And Boeing was probably one of the reasons it became a kind of a lightning rod in the past administration, because they were so engaged with that partnership. Again, out of Washington, sometimes you had these big question marks saying why, but long story written short, it's recognized for its value, and the Trade Center is 110% in support of Exim, always.
Well, it's certainly a very important entity. Well, Ed, in the last minute and a half or so that we have left, how would you, or why would you want to encourage our viewers to look more at international trade, learn more about what's going on, encourage your local businesses to export? If you have a business, you should be involved in this. How would you give them your elevator speech as to why this is important?
If you want to grow your business and you have the means and the desire, you have to think internationally. We're a global economy, Bill, and we know for a fact that 95% of our growth, future growth for businesses, is outside the U.S. It is not domestic. Domestic is still very important for us, but inevitably, as more middle economies or middle classes grow in China, be it in the Americas, then we want to capture that middle class growth. And that's where it happens through international trade and exporting. So any business looking to grow beyond their domestic borders, and it's not for every business, I wouldn't tell you that, but they want to grow that opportunity and grow their business, you have to think internationally.
It's absolutely critical to do that. And as you mentioned, there's so many upsides to it. Now, there are challenges when you're dealing with folks halfway around the world. When you come into these, as we mentioned earlier about the rules and regulations, those types of things.
Can I get paid?
Will I get paid? Exactly. That may or may not happen, but in most cases they do get paid, but in some cases perhaps.
And we've got techniques we can provide companies to make sure they get paid.
Exactly.
So if they just talk to the trade center, we'll direct them to the right folks and say, if that's a concern with a particular country or client, we can help you there.
Exactly. And that's a very good selling point as to why people should go to your website and learn more about the Kentucky World Trade. The World Trade Center Kentucky, I should say, and the World Trade Center organization around the world, because you do have some very unique services. And again, we just looked at a microcosm of Kentucky, but this would apply at least in 88 countries that we didn't identify today. But Ed Webb, I want to thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.